Ever since, people wanted to sail the seas, to discover and to trade overseas. During the age of the great discoveries, the early maritime powers, Spain and Portugal, demanded exclusive sovereignty over the seas, a battle which was settled, effectively dividing the Atlantic Ocean in two by Pope Alexander VI and by the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1493-94. Other powers did not accept this dispute settlement, particularly the French, Dutch and the English. Hugo Grotius, a Dutch legal scholar and early theorist of natural rights, published the book Mare Liberum in 1609 to establish a different legal understanding, the free sea. This freedom of the seas was not unlimited. Coastal states claimed sovereignty over its coastal waters, both for economic as well as security interests. The breadth of the territorial sea was limited to 3 nautical miles, the range of a cannon mounted on the shore. The freedom of the seas and oceans was in place for many decades, without significant further development of the legal framework. 2 world wars, decolonization with tensions between industrialized and developing countries, the Cold War, as well as technological developments, the exploration of marine resources, overfishing, an increase in marine pollution and other marine uses, all this demanded for an international legal instrument for the seas and oceans. A legal order for the seas and oceans. But how? Through an enormous international effort. Since 1949, the international community discussed the law of the sea in the framework of the United Nations. Very long negotiations followed, with an interim solution in 1958. But it was only in 1982 that the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea was adopted, which entered into force in 1994. From a legal freedom at sea, through the free seas, to the legal order for the seas and oceans today. A long way. But the challenges facing this legal order for the seas and oceans are constantly changing. The law of the sea has to be further developed continuously. For example, to promote the peaceful uses of the seas and oceans, the equitable and efficient utilization of their resources, the conservation of their living resources, and the study, protection, and preservation of the marine environment. Oceans were considered an unknown world, and maritime shipping an endeavour without certainty of returning home. Sea monsters waiting for seafarers and risk of falling from the edge of the world lurking beyond the horizon. Thunderstorms destroying ships and diseases decimating whole crews, or encounters with pirates. But also new worlds with treasures and new trade partners were waiting in the unknown. Human curiosity drew the brave out to sea, despite all dangers. Those brave people were seafarers and conquerors at the same time, later even scholars and researchers. Over the centuries, the blank areas on the maritime charts were filled step by those brave people with knowledge about the seas and the world beneath its surface. But with the increasing knowledge about the seas and oceans, the need for rules increased too. Who owns the seas? Who may use the seas and how? No matter whether out of economic, geopolitical or scientific interests. The law of the sea divides the seas into horizontal and vertical maritime zones. The jurisdiction of the coastal states decreases with growing distance from the shore until a point where their sovereignty ends. But even in areas beyond the limits of national jurisdiction, the sea is not a legal vacuum. Based on the ideas from different legal scholars, Arvid Pardo developed an own legal regime for the seabed and ocean floor and subsoil thereof, beyond the limits of national jurisdiction. He suggested a usage for peaceful purposes, where none are harmed and for the benefit of all. The common heritage of mankind principle was born. We still know very little about the largest habitat on Earth. Even today, much remains to be discovered. The law of the sea has, together with marine scientific research and other disciplines, an important task: to provide the basis for a sustainable and responsible use of the sea and its natural resources, as well as for the protection and preservation of the marine environment. Seas and oceans, largest habitats on planet Earth. Wonderful, marvelous, but also vast and powerful. Here lies great beauty and great danger. The sinking of the RMS Titanic is symbolic of the dangers at sea and has engraved itself on human consciousness. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, was adopted in 1914 in response to the Titanic disaster. It is the most important convention on maritime safety. In the 21st century, maritime shipping remains an endeavour fraught with natural dangers. Additionally, there are also threats emanating from humans. An ancient but also recent threat on the seas and oceans is posed by piracy. A further danger is posed by the dumping of weapons, munition and other military remnants, which include whole ships, especially when equipped with nuclear propulsion. One consequence is that fishermen occasionally haul in old sea mines with their fishing nets, or that ammunition dumping sites conflict with other uses or activities on the sea. The SOLAS Convention was amended and updated in accordance with recent challenges over the last decades, for example in 2017 with the adoption of the International Code of Safety for Ships Operating in Polar Waters, Polar Code. The code became necessary since new shipping routes emerged in formerly ice-covered areas due to climate change. For example, the Northeast Passage and the Northwest Passage in Arctic waters, which provide a shorter voyage between Europe, America and Asia compared to the alternative routes through the Suez or the Panama Canal. But climate change also creates additional challenges for humans. The rise of the sea level poses an existential threat for coastal areas, particularly for small island states. They could simply go under. Climate change and oceans, a hot topic which deserves even more attention from the international community. The effects of climate change on the largest habitat on planet Earth are fundamental. At the same time, international shipping is contributing to worldwide CO2 emissions. Climate change is an enormous challenge for the preservation of the seas and oceans today, but not the only one. The threats for the marine environment are diverse and are threatening humankind as a whole. If we do not succeed in protecting and preserving the marine environment, not only the largest habitat on planet Earth is in danger, but also the existence of humankind as a whole. The protection of humans at sea is of vital importance, as is the protection and preservation of the marine environment. It's a challenge pertaining to the survival of humankind itself. The international community has to safeguard the ecological well-being of the seas and oceans. Already today, based on the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, there are numerous international instruments and organizations in place to deal with this challenge. We must build on this and ensure through international efforts that the voyage of humankind on this planet, as well as the human uses and activities of the seas and oceans, will not end in a traumatic shipwreck. Beyond the promenades, beaches and colourful ports, deep on the seabed and ocean floor rest unexploited treasures, fossil and mineral resources like oil, gas and methane hydrate, as well as manganese, nickel, cobalt and copper, unknown life forms and microorganisms which are of particular interest to the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industries. Who owns all this? The coastal state exercises over the continental shelf sovereign rights for the purpose of exploring it and exploiting its natural resources. Beyond the continental shelf, there is the area. The area and its resources are the common heritage of mankind. According to a special legal regime, no claim or exercise of sovereignty or sovereign rights nor appropriation will be recognized. So far, the mineral resources of the deep sea were only explored by marine scientific research. Today, the exploitation of such resources is increasingly in the focus. The exploitation is still complex and costly. The required technologies are predominantly still under development and in the hands of just a few industrialized states. The race for such resources has started. Is it only a question on who is winning this race for the mineral resources of the seabed and ocean floor and subsoil thereof beyond the limits of national jurisdiction? May only a few benefit from the common heritage of mankind? Today, also, marine microorganisms are of special economic importance, particularly for the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industries. At the time of the negotiations and adoption of Unclos, marine microorganisms were not really in the focus of the international community. This will be changed in the future through an internationally legally binding instrument. Seas and oceans hide tremendous treasures. To discover, to explore and to exploit them in a sustainable manner is a right, but also a duty of all states. Unclos provides a legal framework for balancing the general obligation of states to protect and preserve the marine environment and the sovereign right of states to exploit their natural resources. The oceans do not only provide food and oxygen, they are also the largest habitat on Earth, until today mostly unexplored. But we also know images like these: turtles caught in parts of fishing nets, coasts polluted by oil, and dying coral reefs. Are the oceans unprotected from human activities? Is it possible to protect the oceans, and how can this be achieved? The framework is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea from 1982. It obliges states to protect and preserve the marine environment. This is the general obligation on the protection and preservation of the marine environment. The framework, based on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, is filled by international conventions and customary international law, as well as by numerous intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations. In addition to the United Nations Environment Programme UNEP as the leading global environmental authority, the International Maritime Organization IMO is mandated to prevent and control pollution caused by ships. It is the global standard-setting authority for the environmental performance of international shipping. The IMO is also the secretariat for several international conventions, among others for the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, MARPOL. Regional seas programs are of special importance for marine protection. Today, more than 143 states have joined 18 regional seas conventions and action plans. Nowadays, no one doubts the importance of the general obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment. To dump any kind of waste or material secretly into the oceans is becoming more difficult. Modern surveillance and monitoring technologies from air and outer space identify marine pollution and provide legal evidence. There is still a strong need for international and regional cooperation. New activities constantly challenge the existing framework of marine protection. Unclos, in particular, provides the basis to improve and to further develop the protection and preservation of the marine environment.